everybody. I'm Matt Valley. Welcome to episode number 110 of the Rock and Roll Research Podcast, where we share the super cool backstories and side gigs of the research and insights pros that you trust. Well, hey, I'm really excited to welcome the HERDmeister, Mark Earls, to the program today. Now, Mark is a pioneering and award-winning author and consultant when it comes to all things marketing, communications, and behavior change. But now I first met Mark, it must have been a couple decades ago now, actually it was, when I was chairing the annual conference for the American Marketing Association, the Marketing Research Conference in Las Vegas. Mark was a keynote speaker, and he had this presentation that was captivating, dumbfounding, mesmerizing. People didn't really even know what they had just experienced. It was very memorable, and I never forgot it. So super cool. Now, Mark, here's an interesting thing. He's also been fronting a ska band in Old Blighty now for a few decades with a lot of the same players. So I'm excited to get into that and a whole bunch more. So welcome to the show, Mark.
Howdy. Nice to see you.
Yeah, likewise. I'm really excited to have you here. And I get to see you next month at IIEX in Austin, which is really cool.
I'm so pumped about that. I really can't wait. It's been such a long time since I've been to IIEX, and I've always had a really great time with people there. Really interesting audience and really good conversation. So
Yeah, agree. I'm very excited to be there myself. So now let's get started, Mark. So I'm really curious to know how you first got into advertising in the first place, and in particular, how you became so influential in the insight space.
Okay, so the short version of the story is I didn't want to do it. I wanted to stay become a tenured college professor specializing in European literature. That was what I was going to do. That was the plan.
I see.
One reason that didn't happen, and so I was, when I was an undergrad, I'd paid my bills by taking American college and high school kids around Europe in a big bus, right? So that's what I did the tour guide.
Okay. I bet you've got some great stories from that alone.
There are one or two, yes. Yes, don't tell the parents. It was all fine. Yeah, no, but I was doing that, when college commenced again, and my buddies went off to do their jobs. A lot of them went off to do, at the time, it was the explosion of liberalization of financial markets. And so there's a lot of them went off to do financial things, which I thought was really dull. And then there was no other obvious path, right? I mean, these industries didn't used to have any feeders to them. So
right.
My buddy Jamie, he was, if you imagine, he's the poshest Englishman you're ever going to meet. Short of Prince William. He's got a floppy, he did at the time, he hasn't anymore, but he had a floppy blonde fringe, and he wore tweed, and he drank martinis, which was very sophisticated as far as I'm concerned. So
I could see him in my mind's eye.
Well, there you go. So Jamie got a job working for Publicis as a graduate trainee, and after 6 months, he called me up and said, "Listen, I'm resigning. I just think this world is so superficial. So I'm going to be an investment banker instead." So I wasn't quite sure about that. And then just to land it properly, he said, "So I think you'd love it. You'd love it."
You love this superficial.
Exactly. So I then managed to lots of letter writing and phone calls and chasing and hustling, and I eventually got a job at Grey Advertising. And I didn't really know the advertising. I was never really that excited about advertising per se.
Yeah.
It was about solving problems. What I landed within 2 weeks of landing in that ad agency, I found myself in what was known then as the planning department. So it's the insights group, and this is what I want to do. And it's still the time of dial-up internet. So I'd be dialing up and doing cross-tab analyses on this huge database, and being really excited by that, and never having to have the bill presented to me. I was taught how to do focus groups, and how to, and my stats were beaten out of me again. And I just loved it. I thought this was just fantastic. And then I quickly got poached by one of these sort of, I guess they were one of the sort of the centers of this particular thing, invented this thing in advertising world called account planning. and I got taken under the wing of one guy called Paul Feldwick, who some of the listeners may or may not have heard of. He was at DDB. He's one of the greats still about how advertising works. And if you just Google him and have a look, and he talks so cleanly and clearly, with full of insight, based on both individual projects, case studies he's done over the years, and he's written a lot of award-winning effectiveness studies, but also on the basis of studying what the academic literature says about this, about how advertising and that stuff. So he was a genius. But he said to me, listen, early on, listen, I get you are a bit you're challenging the sort of what the researchers and so on, how this stuff works. And in order to do that successfully, you're going to have to know their stuff better than they do and know the models behind it. So he basically sent me off on this enforced study program, which entirely autodidactic. So I had to do it myself. I've never stopped really. So I got really interested in how people work, the models of how people work, what the evidence for is. And you think that this is 30, 40 years. And the guys at the time, it was before the modern contemporary neuroscience stuff had happened. Before Kahneman. It was also certainly before network science had really evolved to be a useful thing. And the idea of a social network was just way in the future. So the models were really simplistic. So I just found it fascinating. And I found myself taking a public stance on stuff.
Right.
I'm very naive, I'm sure, and it's upsetting a number of people. I started taking a stand on what I thought was important. And so I did that. As I went from job to job and position to position, I rose up through the hierarchy. I was more and more vocal about how we got things wrong. It got to one point, and you might see a bit of this in Austin, where I got labelled as the market by the market research industries, the Market Research Society in the UK, their trade magazine, Insight. I was labelled the market research industry's public enemy number one. As a rock and roll guy, I think I love that.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I stood on a stage at their conference, and I had a 20-minute slot, and I just stood there and looked at my watch, and looked at them, and looked at my watch, and looked at them again, and watched the ripples go around the room and the shuffling, because we're all thinking,
Just imagine.
what's going to happen now, and a bit more. And in the way I remember it, I was there for 10 minutes, but I'm sure it wasn't that much. But and I just said, listen, how long? How long? How long are we going to have to wait until you guys catch up with how people really are and what the science tells us about how people really are? We need you. How long? And then walked off, and they had 10 minutes free airtime for, I don't know. So that's the kind of thing, and that really encouraged me, that feedback. Because it wasn't just, you guys are uncool, or you guys are so square, or look, there's loads of stuff that's out there about how people really work. The roles of emotions suddenly being actually taken a bit seriously, but still pushed back from the big players in the market research world.
Mm-hmm.
There was still a lot of information transmission kind of models of communication. AIDA was really, really big. A lot of stuff about persuasion still at the heart of how most advertisers were judging their advertising, and agencies too. And then also about how change happens. And I found myself in my penultimate job. I was lucky enough to be involved with a creative collective, which went from 50 people to 150 while I was sort of doing strategy stuff there.
Yeah.
St. Louis. And they were amazing people, and extraordinarily talented bunch, but it was chaos because it was owned by all of the employees. So everyone got a share of the business.
Right.
And each gave out the equal share to everybody who was qualified. So, and while I was there, I got really interested in some of the social issues, more than I had been before, not just about how advertising changes behavior, but behavior change generally. And work with a number of interesting organizations, work with the Body Shop a bit, work with government. I was on a couple of big government panels.
Sure.
And I found myself really getting more and more involved in this idea that maybe we weren't individualist. We were sort of little individual slivers of humanity that made decisions on our own. Maybe that wasn't the best way to understand us. And and that then led to me when I moved from there. We all naturally, because crazy creative collective, we all fall out with each other, so we did boom.
Right.
Places. And then I found myself in sort of near the top of the Ogilvy organization. That was just crazy. And Ogilvy were obsessed at the time with one-to-one communication. I don't know if you remember this. This is early
Mhm.
2000s. There's sort
Yeah.
of digital communication and digital media were understood as a replacement for the letter. There was sort of micro-targeting and that kind of
Yep.
and there's a place for that in lots of businesses, right, and lots of organizations. But the notion that humans are individuals living on there, it just didn't seem to work. And I was in a global position. I found myself realizing that my colleagues in other countries, in other cultures, were probably better educated than me. But there's something they weren't telling me about how they really thought people operated. So when
Right.
I'm working with people from Argentina and from Brazil and from Thailand and from Hong Kong and from mainland China and from Scandinavia and from Italy and Barcelona, these people all have a fundamentally different view of how humanity exists, and that is that we're a social creature. So
Right.
I had a sort of theological split from that, and I was writing papers and presenting and developing tools that based on this stuff, and I won a prize at, first of all, the Market Research Society for the best new paper, best new thinking, and a couple of years later, and that was sort of working out some of the implications for research and insight.
Mhm.
And a couple of years later, I did the same thing at SMR, and same result, but more detail of. And by this time, there was a sort of momentum. So, because one of the things that I've loved about the insights world is that actually, for all the things I moaned about when I was younger, it is more innovative than most of the creative industries. People
Ah,
trash it,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
people are always branching off and saying, "I've got this great idea, a new methodology for doing this." People go and do that, and it's really interesting. And I mean, just take, for example, the amazing transformation that the survey industry, part of the market research and insights industry, had done in recent years, moving not just from offline face-to-face interviews, but to online interviews. And just without barely a blink. We moaned about it beforehand and said it's going to be terrible, but done it. And then also you look at the likes of what Zappy have done and go, we can do this faster, cheaper. Why
Yeah.
would you buy the whole of a Millward Brown pretest when you just need this bit here?
Right.
Upload it, use it yourself, and then do your own analysis. So really, really innovative stuff, or what John Kieran and the System One guys have done. I
Yeah.
think that's another really interesting, and not just about the advertising piece of it, because I think that's often misunderstood as the heart, the spiritual heart of that business is their concept testing, which is based on the wisdom of crowds insight from, well, it's a old piece of social science where in the right conditions, the crowd is smarter than the smartest individual at predicting and guessing things. And so
Yeah.
I think the industry is actually really innovative. And so that for me was a real sort of injection in the arm, a shot that made me then go, okay, so really do this, really go. And I'd written Herd by then, but then I took this to, I found myself weirdly being invited into all sorts of communities I'd never imagined. So it was picked up by a number of academics because it was the first time that the sort of aggregation of various social sciences had been put together. Some academics really hated it
Yeah.
because you got too much attention in what your qualifications and you're not peer reviewed, all that
Right.
shit.
Right. Yeah.
So I got urinated on a few times from that. But some people were really keen to collaborate, and one of them I actually saw last week, who teaches at Tennessee now. He's a Professor Alex Bentley, and we ended up writing a book. He's an anthropologist and archaeologist,
Mhm.
and he and I worked together on, okay, so if this third thing is right, not all behavior is shaped by other people. Some is not shaped by other people, some is, but how can we tell? And he and I worked together and we created this really simple map that based on patterns, the patterns from diffusion science that you see in any data set. You can see them in any data set, sales data, clicks, whatever, search, SEO. You can see the patterns in the data which tell you how, whether this is being done by an individual acting on their own or an individual under the influence of other people. That's
Mhm.
the the main dimension, the x-axis, if you like, and then the other dimension we can also tell, which is how informed or uninformed this is. So so the best kind of maps have 4 quarters, right? 4
Yeah.
quadrants.
Yep.
So it's really useful, so we wrote a book together for MIT, and that was adopted by a number of people. By this time, I'm getting the European security services on my back, not because I'm a bad person and they've read what I said when I was a student and radical undergrad, but quite the opposite. That this was, again, the Herd book was really useful, and this map was really useful for them to start thinking about the things that they found really difficult, like crowd behavior. How can you tell simply how can you triage this stuff without having a really expensive high-end computer model that takes forever? Can you rapidly triage what's in front of me? That was the benefit of the model being robustly based in social science and in quantitative data allows it to be used qualitatively successfully. So that was another thing. So I found myself with them, and I got to say, the time of the second Iraq War, I was getting emails from people in the field going, so you said last week, what do you think we should do here? I go, I have no idea. You're the military guys. I'm just this, insights person. Anyway,
Wow.
so I did that, and then one of the things that I've been really interested in, and it's a theme throughout my career, is, and I'll talk a bit about this, I think, in Austin, is that we have focused too much, and we do tend to focus too much on describing things. And as if that by describing things accurately, ever more precisely, at an ever more granular level, we will drive the action from our users, from our data users. And we know that's not true. So we've then made the next bit, which is what we're going to do is we're going to make beautiful PowerPoint from this. We're going to have a deck that's just to die for. And you go, well, is that really it? And then we've gone as far as saying, we'll do a couple of workshops to just share the information, and and that's still not it.
This is resonating.
So, but I think that we've got to move from creating data and creating insights from the data to actually making this data change people's behavior. I mean, I'm going to quote Marx now because we're rock and roll. Marx famously said about philosophy, said, the point is not to describe the world, but to change it. And the insights world has been very recessive historically. Need to be, and when we've come forward, it's been about the accuracy of our predictions. We're going to see that this year, in the year of presidential elections, we're going to see polling everywhere. Nate Silver's back on the pitch, and there are people already in my inbox just shouting about the accuracy of their polling predictions. And a lot of noise about that. That's prediction. The issue is not prediction. The issue is if you're in an organization, and I'm going to turn around to face the opposite direction now. It's not about whether the information is precisely correct or more precise than the last one. It's what do you do with it?
Right.
What do you do with this stuff? How do you turn it into action? Because any organization that is of any substance is, even a small to medium enterprise, is like a super tanker. It takes forever to turn around. Then you have to learn how to do things and get the organization good at doing it, not just go, here's the information, press the button, that's the new strategy, off you go, everyone, execute. Yes. So I think we have to go not upstream as we've described it, which is into the boardroom, but sort of more actually across the stream and to where the real stuff is, which is how do we change an organization given what we know about how people are, what we know how people respond to things. And how do we help them do stuff better? I think. Does that make sense as a shift in approach? And that's what I do.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. It makes me think as well. I'm very curious to know your take on this, because as I think of another paradigm that has sort of done that, like saying, here you've been analyzing the data wrong all along. Here's what it really says, and then being very prescriptive in terms of here's what you should do about it, is the Ehrenberg Bass Institute, Byron Sharp, how brands grow. I'm curious to know what your take is on that.
Okay. I've got to declare an interest that I was lucky enough to have Andrew Ehrenberg be one of my mentors when I was younger.
Yeah,
And
I had a chance to meet him when I was just a young pup in the industry.
it's amazing, right? And his thick European accent and his really big, heavy glasses
Yeah.
is very considered. Really lovely man. Really, really lovely. He came to my first book launch. I was so pleased. I
Oh,
interviewed.
that's amazing.
So what I loved about Andrew was that he was very modest. And the Dirichlet that he's done actually features in that map that I created with Alex Bentley. That map of how people choose, how people, how do we sort choices. So that's, but it's only in one quadrant, and it describes repeated habitual behavior that's typical. That's the same kind of pattern we see. It's a specialist. It's a specific case of the curves that we identify in there.
Right.
Andrew, though, was famous outside the marketing world
Mm-hmm.
as a statistician, and not for his Dirichlet, but for his data reduction
Mm-hmm.
effort. So I don't know if you're back in the day, we used to be able to report, cardinal numbers, but we'd have a piece of data, we'd have 2 or 3 data points just to show how clever we were and how precise we were. And it's pointless, Andrew said. You have to ideally not have any 0.0, 0.3. It's got to be cardinal numbers only.
Mm-hmm.
That's all. Then you can start to see that an audience can start to see the patterns. And I think that's something that that the Institute has sort of spirited that's taken on, which is that are there laws about how things behave?
Right.
And I think that's really useful. Byron is a very funny chap.
He is.
And that's me being very British there. And I've known him for a long time. He can often be quite waspy about things, but I think that the debate about the precise recommended action, like this thing about distinctiveness and what's the other one? Differentiation.
Mm-hmm.
It's just irrelevant, frankly. The big learning is that mostly and most of the time, your job is to get more users,
Right.
not focus on loyalty. Mostly, so there are some exceptions, but that's mostly your job. Get everyone to buy a bit more.
Yeah.
And that advertising isn't this powerful. We know this from other sources. Advertising isn't a really big, powerful force for behavior change. It's a relatively weak one. But it does have significant lasting effects in the medium and long term, as well as the short term.
Right.
So that's good, right? That's good. And then you go, so how does it achieve its effect? Well, he has really nothing to say about that, and that's okay. But stop there would be my recommendation. Stop. Because this is really useful stuff that Andrew would have been proud of. Some simple axioms to work on your communication and how stuff changes. What I think they continue to pump out some really good stuff, but I'm this point between here's the significance of what we found and here's the precise recommendation of what you should do. I think we all need to be clear where the expertise ends.
Sure.
And it's like I've written endlessly, and I've played this with a lot of audiences. The brand idea is a really useful idea. It's really useful in lots of ways, but it isn't actually a thing, and it's very distracting. It's not, the brand. It's not, it's often an excuse to say get people to do things you want them to do, or not to do the things you don't want them to do. So this is a control mechanism, if you like, and it can be like raising a standard to gather the troops together and point in that direction. That's what brand stuff can be good. And it also just make it simpler so you don't have 200 things going out that all look different in communications, or the communications and the product experience being different, or you see what I mean? So it's a really useful thing. However, and I played this game called the Beanard, and my German teacher at school was Barnard, so I call it Beanard, and which is like the brand, same word, same letters, just around in a different order. And the game is this: is that anytime you have any phrase that involves the B word, you can't use the B word, so you have to explain what you actually mean.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So if it is reputation, that means the reputation of the company as far as the customers are concerned, not the company at this level, but the company and the products that it does.
Yeah.
That seems like a longhand explanation, but we know what we mean when we're that clear.
Yeah.
Where if you say brand, you go, okay, so brand identity. What do you mean by that? The way things look on the page? Or do you mean something bigger? You want that to be conjured. So let's be really clear. The B design guidelines are these. The impression we want to create is this. Different thing.
Yeah.
Does it make sense? So similarly, I'm really keen on clarity and that kind of thing, and happy to be hung, drawn, and quartered and ridiculed for it. But in my experience, it's much better if we don't get into one of my worst tasks as a young account planner was to write a playbook for best practice on creating Axe advertising around the world, and it should be about 80 to 100 pages long, said the client. And we spent 3 weeks arguing about whether or not the brand had humor in it or whether it was funny. You go, this is just stupid, pointless waste of my life and yours, and nobody wins because you hate me whatever happens and I'll hate you whatever happens. So let's just not do that. Let's go, okay, are there times when this brand can use humor to make its point? Yes. What kind of humor do we think at this point that we'd be okay with, and what might be too far for us? Let's just be honest like that, and let's not talk about brand tonality guidelines. Oh, just bugger off, honestly. Let's get on and make something. That's the other thing. So just like I'm keen for the insights world to move from creating data, handing over data in beautiful decks and so on, I want us to be involved in making the things that we can then iteratively test and move on and develop, rather than hand over, this is the information that if now you've got the information, do what you want, right? This is it.
Right.
This is the answer. No, the answer will never be in the data. The answer will always be in the CX or in the product qualities or in the way it's delivered to customers in the store or whatever. That's where it really counts.
Right.
So I think that it's quite easy for us, and it's guys who call themselves strategists, I think, also have this same thing, that you lean back away from those nasty, messy people there, because I've got truth and data on my side.
Right.
And I'm not going to get caught up in that messy, confusing world out there. I told you what the answer is. If only you do it, you see, if only you do it, then you'd be really successful.
Yeah. See, you didn't do it. So
I told you what to do, but you didn't. And I think that a conversion into action is really important. So I last time I was at IEX, I was thinking about the future, and there's a lot. Foresight has now become a big deal, right? I know there's a number of people talking about the future. I was rather on my own last time. It was me and Harry Popper and his wonderful science fiction business. Wonderful. But I think that the problem with thinking about the future in the insight world is that we think about describing the future and look about the future, not lots of futures, and we don't get people engaged with it. This is, the learning from the great scenario planner Harry de Huys was that you have to get people to really engage. And I think it's not by describing the scenario in a more detailed way, because we can all do that. And there's wonderful people out there, wonderful futurologists, futurists, whatever they call themselves, foresight artists. The issue is, how do we make something? How do we? So I say in thinking about the future, I do one, it's multiple. Think multiple.
Right.
Think not just 5. Think 20, and then think about what the impact of those is going to be. T-shirt size it. Don't give me a precise number. T-shirt size. Then probability. T-shirt size it again. Now, what are the things that you need to do today, this week, this month, to start to mitigate that? Because you know what the impact's going to be. You kind of know it's going to get you in the business. Example being, did some great work with a wonderful Lisa, who was at Merck for a long time. She's absolutely one of my favorite collaborators. She's absolutely brilliant. And this is pre-lockdown with her teams thinking. We built lots of these games for her. and her team. And one of the things came out was, what if Amazon becomes the US's largest distribution network for prescription drugs? What if, right? What if?
Okay.
Question to you then: what's the impact that going to be on a large manufacturer of pharmaceuticals like Merck? What's it going to be? Well, it's going to be our sales and distribution is going to be completely challenged.
Yeah.
We're going to lose control of that because we've got some independent, and we've got the medical specialists, and through to healthcare professionals in that way. Well, so it's completely different, completely screwed.
I could see profitability being majorly challenged as well.
But so we know where it's going to impact. What's the likelihood of that? They go, well, it's never going to happen, isn't it? Really? Well, that's why they bought Whole Foods. Seriously, it's in their fundraising around the purchase of Whole Foods. That's what they want to do. They want to be into the, because they see it as an easy win for their amazing logistics. So we know that it's going to be a major impact, and we know where in the business it's going to impact, and we know that it's between, oh my God, I don't want it to happen at all, unlikely, to quite probable, given Amazon tend to do what they do. They say they're going to do. They tend to get there in the end, and so let's plan for that. Is my answer. So plan for it. What do we do today to deal with the scenario? So one, we email around. Does anyone know anyone who's worked with Amazon? Like, it's a really simple question. Phone a friend. Two, we then interview that person and read the case studies about what it's like to be in the Amazon logistics system.
Yeah.
What are the implications of that? And how do you win, and what are the elephant traps? And three, we then go and see Amazon and ask them if there's anything we can help them with, because we need to play with this future. Whilst we may not want it, we're going to need to play with it and learn how it works. And we need to be helpful to them in order to be a partner in it. We need to back both that horse and the one that we're currently on, and we're probably several other horses as far as distribution is concerned. But we need to back all those. So what that means is you go away from a future planning session. We reduce the whole thing down to, it's literally a day for a leadership team.
Yeah.
That's all. It's not 6 months of nonsense, and this is a day. And you go away from that with an action plan of your priority scenarios, whether it's opportunities or threats. What the actions are you going to take today, and who's going to do that? What the action you're going to take this week? What you're going to take this month? And suddenly you've turned future foresight stuff from some sort of showground kind of hustler. I sense there's someone in the room who's called with a J. I'm getting J. Is J with black? J with black? Yeah, J with black hair. Yeah, is that right? Or black shirt? I don't know. It's J. So that's the kind of thing that actually it feels, if you're a buyer of this kind of thing. From that to actually, when we're changing the business, we're changing how the business actively engages with alternative things that are coming up, and we're helping the business get better at this stuff. We have got our hands dirty. Look, we're not telling you how precisely this, that's a separate job, and easy to go, these scenarios, what's the probability right now? Let's go and model that. That's a separate thing. But as a leadership team, we've now given them the information, and we're involved as insights people in the making of things.
Yeah. You know what else? That sounds very different for those researchers who are locked into that desk research, focus groups, and survey mindset. Sounds like a very different process.
Yeah, no, totally. But imagine you were not just technically a good focus group researcher, but you actually said, okay, we're going to need you in this group because you've spoken to people.
Yeah.
You know about how people respond. So we're going to need you in this group. Come in.
Right.
Come give us your experience, and how can we test some of these hypotheses we've got about what might be important, what not. So help us. What do we do?
Sure.
And now I think, rather than turning the handle and doing another 12 groups, and there's 3 on the East Coast, 3 in Chicago, and then there's some down in the Sun Belt, and we've all done that. And let's do some in Canada just in case, You know what I mean? It's just that's an easy thing to do, and I don't think any of us can survive for very long in the future if we are just turning the handle on what we do. We have to all find ways to make what we do more useful and embedding it in our clients' organizations, or if we're in a client organization, take what our stuff and actually engage with the rest of the organization more usefully, understand their needs, help them, and be practical.
Yeah, yeah, cool, cool. I love it. I love it. And let's get back to insights in a second.
Yeah.
But of course, it's time for some rock and roll. So
Yay.
let's hear about your ska band, man.
So we have played together. We've played together 3 decades and more. And we started because we all played sport together. You know, we're all Brits. And we played cricket together every weekend. And we all won on a weekend trip away and ran a campfire, and someone had brought a guitar.
Mm-hmm.
Realized a number of us actually had played in bands when we were teenagers and at college, and it was just, I said, okay, let's this time next year, let's come back here with a band. So we did. And it was a bit chaotic, and we only had one mic stand between us at the time, so there was a broom with a mic taped on with you know with
One mic stand for a ska band, that doesn't work.
I know, exactly. Well, at the time we played a bunch of stuff because we all grew up in sort of the punk era from which ska emerged.
Yeah,
And we played a bunch of punk stuff and played some of the glam stuff from the era before.
yeah,
And gradually we've become more and more ska. And you know, we do a few of the punk or the glam stuff for encores or, you know, special requests or whatever that. But it's mostly ska. And we, you know, like I said, we've been together for those decades. We've got a new boy who's been with us for 15 years now.
oh, just a rookie.
Yeah, rookie, right? Six. He's the sixth member of the band. And at every gig, I ask the audience to vote on whether or not he should be able to come back next time, get through the next round. So yeah, so
Very democratic of you.
no, I think it's important, and also listen to your audience, right?
Yeah.
Put it in their hands. And yeah, we love it. And we absolutely do. And we have fun in our rehearsals. So all of us have played with bands when we were younger, where there was somebody who was a complete, yeah.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
And all of us
pictured in my head.
Yeah, you know the word. And listeners, dear listeners, whatever word you choose, it's not my choice, it's yours. And we also that, you know, if you're going to be good, good enough, you need to be enjoying the way to get good, which is the practice. So you need to have rehearsals you enjoy, that you laugh at.
Totally.
And yet you need to be good enough to pull it together when you go. And so we have those things. And then also over the years, I've got more confident as the front man. And so my job is to orchestrate the thing, and that includes the audience.
Yeah.
So it's as much, it's not my band, it's the band, and I'm the guy at the front who's waving his arms and shouting into the microphone and, making noises and giving a shout out to the posse from Dorset or whatever,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the front man for a ska band is the singer, but is also the hype man, right? So there's a lot of responsibility there.
Exactly. The shouter more than the singer, I think you'll find.
All right, so I'm picturing the Specials and stuff from that era. One of the best bands ever, in my opinion.
Totally.
Now, does that also include some U.S. based, like Operation Ivy kind of stuff, or maybe?
No. I'll tell you what, we keep experimenting, pushing the envelope, and we play old ska tunes from the 60s and early 70s. And ska and rocksteady and a little bit of early reggae, but it's our audience, right? And the audience is quite conservative, and so we just keep pushing it a bit. And things they know is what they like. So here's a thing you haven't heard you can't believe anyone's going to do this, so we'll do it, but you know it already. So we keep it a fairly safe field, but we constantly rearranging it and finding new ways to do something. So there's I don't know if you guys have this. There was this animated movie which played every Christmas, The Snowman. It's a British movie, and it's got this beautiful choral voice at the top singing, "Walking in the Air." I was walking in the air, and it's it's just a lovely piece, la, 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 very traditional. So we arranged a ska version, which we play every Christmas fundraising gig we do. We do a Christmas fundraising gig. And we do it, and I get out my melodica, right, which is normally used as an instrument of torture in high schools. Um, and get people up on stage, and got sleigh bells, and got, and we got the audience, and so one of the tunes we play a lot in the band is by actually, it was a sort of a just after Scario, Dexys were a sort of a soul band, Celtic soul band, and they and one of theirs is, it's just got this great horn riff, and it's about a R&B singer from the late 60s, early 70s who used to tour in the UK all the time. And it's just got this riff that goes da 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 da, the horn riff. And of course, we only got one horn player, and
Yeah.
despite having access to pedals now, it's just the one horn player. So I get people up on stage, and I get everyone in the audience playing kazoos, right?
Nice.
So we have, last time we had about 30 people, because it's fun, right? We're not going to be discovered. It's far too late for that, and no one's going to mistake us for the real thing. We're not. We're not that. We're just people who enjoy what we do, and every time we do it, people want to come back, and that's just great, right? So we get our side hustle of music without any hassle.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the live ska experience is just incomparable. I mean, that's the way to do it. So awesome. So how do you contrast? So you've been doing this in parallel for the last few decades, along with your career. How might you compare and contrast a life in music versus a life as an iconoclastic insights person?
Well, that's very good of you to say that word. I'm not sure my teeth are up to that, but so I think I think I think it's the same thing, right? Which
Yeah,
is, so I play with the audience in my presentations, because I don't know about you, but I get bored after about 15 minutes in any presentation, however interesting.
yeah,
I mean, it's true for a lot of people, which is why the TED Talks are 17 and a half minutes. That's your thing, right? And you're bored after that, and you have to justify people's attention, even if they paid to be there. You have to make it a show. You have to think about it as a show, not a transmission of information, or a run through of your holiday snaps, right? This is not.
yeah,
They're not that interested, even though they say they are, even though they're there for professions and they've paid to be there. Even so, they're not that interested. So I have designed, for a long time, I don't do presentations, I do shows. And I design them with the audience in mind. And we do games like, do things like doing the wave, right? To show people, and it's a really good example. And I was talking a lot about social stuff, about how ideas spread through populations. The wave is a great way to do it.
yeah, yeah,
There's not a lot of thinking going on there, which is typical of lots of human decisions. Not a lot of thinking, and actually you just see it coming. You go, okay, I'll do that then. You kind of know as well, and they're doing, and people synchronize with each other without having a calculator or some kind of drawing board or chalkboard saying, okay, when this happens, you do this, and you do, and we all get what it is, and we do it, and it works most of the time. It works brilliantly. And I use those things as a way to land the bigger thoughts,
yep,
because and also to get people to feel what are otherwise concepts. Feeling is, I think, really important. So make people feel stuff. So when I did this book for MIT with the prof called I'll Have What She's Having, subtitled Mapping Social Behavior, right? But I'll Have What She's Having, what I insisted we called it. And that's from that scene in When Harry Met Sally in the diner.
yeah,
And it's, so I don't have to say it to you because you know the scene, right?
right,
And we can picture that in our heads. I say that. But I've played that clip to audiences who are so straight, to bankers, to doctors, to German qualitative researchers. I've played
yeah,
it again, and again. And organizers always say, don't do it. I go, well, no, I'm going to, because if you say don't, I'm just going to do it. But because that feeling of discomfort that people have as the scene unrolls
yep,
from the movie, they've seen it before and they know what's going to happen. They know how this is going to end, but they still feel really uncomfortable. That won't leave them. So they'll never forget that actually human behavior is largely shaped by this one mechanism. I'll have what she's having.
yeah. Well, I can attest firsthand because I saw your presentation a couple decades ago, and that's the feeling I had was discomfort with the wave, right?
Yeah.
It persisted, and it really did make it memorable and landed the point. So,
I mean, that's the problem. So that's part of the show. But at the same time, I have to make things, any bit of information I've got for you, I have to either storyfy it or turn it into an activity or be a personal reflection that you can have.
yeah,
You can have you as an audience, you get to play too.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
and I think that's really important as well. Yeah, Dead for me is the presentation. It's a show.
yeah. It forced me to interrogate myself and say, am I this person too? Right. And that's where the discomfort comes from, right? No one wants to say, oh yeah, we do what the crowd does.
Yeah, yeah.
But I mean, to really kind of turn, the gaze on yourself, it's like, okay, I'm
Absolutely.
not
And
going to
some
tell
people,
anybody this, but I can see how I'm this person.
but so it's interesting is
Yeah,
you play that game in China, in mainland China, in Shanghai, let's say, or Beijing, and people look at you weirdly because of course that's true.
yeah,
Of
yeah,
course,
right.
what are you
Yeah,
saying, crazy white man? Honestly,
yeah,
really, what are you saying? They're far too polite to say that, but
yeah,
to vocalize that. But you can see that going on behind their eyes, and I think that's we have to make stuff personal in order for it to really sink in.
yeah,
We have to be okay with, we have to be okay with losing that distance, that intellectual distance that a
right.
certain. And I'm not arguing for someone, there was the bunch of late 60s psychiatrists who in Europe who would literally sit and take drugs with their
Yeah,
patients. And I'm not arguing for that. I'm not saying that distance, losing it that way. But we do have to accept these things we're saying about human behavior are true of us too.
yeah,
And we also have to accept that, when we feel discomfort, it's probably a cultural thing. And that's one of my other big themes. It's a cultural thing. We don't like to think this about ourselves because we come from this kind of culture. Other
sure.
cultures are different, but we have to challenge that stuff because if we don't challenge it, then we're blinkered.
Yep. Okay. So let me ask you this. We were talking
Yep.
about the future and how
Mhm.
the future is multiple,
Yep.
but you've long been sort of on the bleeding edge of where insights is happening, at least where the thought leadership is.
Mm.
So if you think about the future of insights, what comes to mind for you?
Well, I think like a lot of other industries, we will find ourselves both being commoditized. We've seen that already, right?
Sure.
And that's death. Nobody
Yep.
wants to work in that environment, and nobody can sustain the kind of businesses we've got. I think there's also because a number of things are already happening, and I think the future, as they say, is already here, just unevenly distributed. So I
Hmm.
think there will be a bunch of people who, the latest thing is AI. It
Yep.
was blockchain and big data a few years
Mhm.
ago. Saying there'll be people making some noise about that, and we all have to have a bit of that going on in our lives, and so there'll be sort of excitement about that, and some businesses will come out of that will be really interesting.
Yeah.
But it's just it's not a passing phase because that makes it sound really dismissive. It is just one of those things that's it's gonna change how we do stuff like just like the moving online survey work. So
Right.
it's gonna do that. I think there are signs already from businesses like Zappy
Hmm.
that um, we're really going to have to crash the time and the speed and cost
Yeah.
that we used to be working to. We're just going to have and we're just going to have to do that again and again and again and get used to that. Every other industry has really have to face that too. You can't, the movie industry pays a lot of money, but they found ways of doing it faster and a bit cheaper than they used to.
Yeah.
Doing
Yeah.
more 3.5 hours for the price of two, right? But
Yeah, you know what? It's really interesting because I saw Heiko Schaefer from Kimberly Clark
yeah, yeah,
speak at the event on Tuesday, and he had an interesting perspective. He was talking about the trifecta of faster, cheaper,
yeah,
better,
yeah,
and he was talking about what was most important, what has emerged as most important. And I was expecting him to say better,
Mhm.
just thinking about data quality issues and all this stuff. And he said faster.
Yeah.
He said faster is the number one. We have to keep up with the business, and if we can't, we're dead.
I
And
think
I thought that was a really interesting perspective.
spot on, spot on. And I think that I would say what's hidden there is useful.
Yeah, right,
We
right.
have to think about the business as our stakeholders, the customers that we're serving. And yeah, we have to then, once we got to there, what are their needs and so on, then we can start to partner with them. And we have to embed ourselves in those businesses and worry less about the kind of thing that, when I started in the insights world, people would regularly do a 12,000 person survey,
Mhm.
12,000 samples. What the 10, 12,000? That's just ridiculous number of people, and if you look at, 30, 40 years before that, what George Gallup and co were doing, they were talking about 100,000 people as a reasonable size for
Yeah,
polling.
right.
So we have to move on and lose some of our, or find workarounds for some of our technical and methodological um, um, standards. We have to change that stuff. And for me, the issue is if you're useful, it's less important that you're precisely right.
Yeah. Yeah, you know what comes to mind with that is the field of user experience research, which grew up more out of design sprints,
Totally.
and they really aren't married to the dogma of
Yeah.
market research that goes back years and years with statistical significance. And
Yeah.
it is about being useful, right? It's very
Totally.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to bake into those contexts
Yeah.
the frames that we are now understanding about how people work. So
Yeah.
that not to just do it to be sort of decorative, if you like,
Yeah.
and find a bit of something to do there, but actually to be useful and right. Here's another example, which is from uh, do a lot of innovation stuff with clients, helping them not just to predict the future, but to make the future, if you like. And I'm not alone in doing this, but one of the things I do teach people is how to do their own early research.
Hmm. Right.
It's just really important. And for a long time, the research and insights people in the organizations that I've worked with have really hated it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Because they don't want to lose any control. Everything research happens here, right?
Totally. And I think that it'd be far better as a research and insights pro if your skills were then diffused through the organization. You would be more powerful and more successful rather
Yeah.
than keeping it to yourself.
Yeah.
And keep the old ways of, well, of course, that's not our formal approach. Look, I'm in Bogota with 20 mixed team leadership team from this data business, and we've got half a dozen insights we need to test, and to bring those alive, we've done some really simple paper prototypes of what a value prop might look like on a phone.
Right.
Seriously, we've just done that in the last 3 days, so we're going to go and do some street interviews now.
Yeah.
What's the problem, right? What's the problem?
Yeah.
It's really fast, really useful. It can't be relied on totally, but it makes them think hard about the customer, which is
Yeah.
one of the things that that's one of the things that marketing as a philosophy should continue to do. And if we're going to be insights people who own the customer or are seen to be the experts in the customer, then we have to encourage that kind of behavior, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I love it. I love it. So I'm interested to know, thinking about what sources you use to help inform your perspective going forward, media sources. What's valuable to you?
Mm. Everything. Everything. So I'm a real bookworm, so I read all of the time. And I've got a number of feeds from like different academic sources, and then also so many trends reports that just really not that interested, to be honest. There's just too much noise,
Yeah.
and hard to select between them. And this, I think that I don't have a I don't I'm trying to think of what I've got on my feeds. I think that I use things like McKinsey, the big media groups, HBR, they all give me really interesting views about what's happening in business. I think the psychology and the sociology and the anthropology stuff is really useful, just constant flow of that. And then there's, this stuff that I find myself reading, like I reread this summer, and I haven't read it for a long time. It gave me a headache, but it's really good. It's a book by Eric Hobsbawm, who was a fantastic Marxist history professor from in the UK. He was a European emigre, amazing man, and I know his daughter and niece quite well. And it's called what's it called? The Creation of Tradition. I think that's it. It's basically and it's a series of essays collected from historians in the late 60s, 70s, and early 80s, about how what we think of tradition as being completely faked. It's just not tradition. It's just stuff that somebody solve, and we've taken it on. It's like it's like dress up. Tartan is a great example. This idea of Scottish identity based on Scottish Highlanders. They didn't wear skirts. It's cold and wet, and it's got midges that bite you in the Highlands. Nobody does that. That would be stupid.
Yeah.
So they didn't wear kilts. They wore trousers, and actually they just wore any old thick cloth that could help them. Didn't
Sure.
and the patterns of tartan that they were chosen, we now think is really important, came from the Netherlands and Belgium. They weren't a native Scottish thing. Like, British gone about fish and chips. Not a British thing at all. It came largely from Jewish emigres in the 19th century in the East End of London and in Manchester. So tradition has often been made by somebody else, and so I think that helps me understand something about when I've got something presented to me. Go, this is the way we've always done it. Go, well, maybe not. It's interesting. It's interesting that you think it's a tradition and therefore sort of unchallengeable. But it isn't. But it isn't.
Yeah. Fascinating. I'm going to be looking for those examples now as I go about my.
They're really good. And there's another one, Benedict Anderson, and this is quite topical for what we're facing in both in the US and the UK and Europe right now, in our political scene. There's Benedict Anderson wrote a great book, I think in the 80s, which challenges the notion of the nation state, or not challenges, it describes as a historian where the nation state, the idea of it came from. And this thing we have about, this mixture of the idea of language and origin story and so on. It's just invented. It was invented by your good selves, by by the first colonists when they create a nation. Who we are, what language we speak, that was decided clearly, and where we come from, why we're here. But it was then borrowed by everyone else, and the whole post-colonial era, the notion of identity, national identity, comes from it. So it's a bit of an academic, geeky thing to read, but those kind of things, constantly pushing new things in that constantly remind me to go question the stuff that I have. Because if you tell me something's true, I'm going to challenge it, just because that's where I create value.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean I'm going to do it just because to be arsy or to be difficult or to be unpopular, to make you feel uncomfortable. Because in order for us to move forward, we have to challenge some of these lazy thoughts.
Yeah.
That's why I challenged, the whole herd thing was about challenging the notion that the individual, the consumer, is not more choose your wife, David Ogilvy said, but it's not the consumer because A, they're not consumers, they're people, and B, they're not on their own. They live in a carefully constructed social world.
Yeah.
Always have that.
Yeah, lots to think about. These concepts that you think are timeless and have no beginning and no end, that you just take for granted and never think about.
You take for granted. It's handed down to you. You go, right, let's just do your best within this little game. And actually, sometimes we go, let's just do that. That's easy. Let's follow what we think best practice in survey design, let's say.
Yeah.
But actually, it's worth asking yourself, is it better to, for example, with my herd stuff, is it better to ask people about themselves, or is it better to ask them about other people?
Yeah.
That's a simple divide in applying this bigger insights to our world of insights. Which is better? And it depends, right? It depends. It turns out it depends whether the behavior is an individual choice or it's a social choice. Whether the thing is spread through social means or by people individually picking the thing up and going, actually, this is the thing for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, fascinating. Good stuff to think about. All right, I could talk about that all day with you, Mark, and we
Me,
will have the chance at IIEX Austin.
me,
To
great. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. Next month.
Yeah, next one.
That's awesome. So the important thing here that I want to learn, I've learned so much in this short time, actually. But what I really want to know, Mark, and you know it's coming, and I'm glad you've had a chance to think about it, right? So you don't have to dither about it. But
Okay.
you're stranded on a desert island.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
have 3 records of your choosing to keep you company for the rest of your days. What are they, Mark?
Okay. Number one is Monkey Man, the specials cover of the Monkey Man of
Yes.
the Maytals Monkey Man. Um,
Yes. I was
that is
hoping for
my,
some specials.
so that is my that's our signature tune in the band.
Awesome.
And we have performed that for 30 minutes at one particular party we were playing, and
Wow, that's awesome.
to get have a lie down afterwards. I mean, in particularly the bass player, because it is basically the same notes over and over and over and over and over and over and over. And it's just saying, can we just drop everyone out so I can stop and stretch my feet? No, keep going. Come on.
Good stuff.
No, keep going, keep going. So that's and I love it. And you know, the specials is probably my favorite album of all time. I
Yeah.
love all kinds of music. I mean, even choral music and opera and stuff. And I was a choir boy when I was another kid. Don't let anyone know. But I love all kinds of music,
It's
and
another story.
but that was one that I really love.
Love it.
Now, I was thinking when you told me to ponder this question, I was thinking number two, and I was thinking something really rocky, and just by contrast, and I was lucky enough to be around in the punk era in the UK, and it was extraordinary. And we saw bands like the Clash and the Pistols
Yeah.
and Buzzcocks and all that came afterwards, and it was really exciting. And it was really exciting, and it's affected me and my peers, I think, culturally, in this way, in that we believe that we can get up and do something, even though we really can't play it very well. It's no
Yeah.
longer
Totally.
sort of 10-minute guitar solos or drum solos or bass solos. God, or Spinal Tap, if you remember, did a song with 3 bass players. It's just
That's right.
extraordinary.
Big bottom, if I recall correctly.
So really, it felt that's the revolutionary bit there that I think that plays out in my life generally. I'm not going to take shit from people, and if you want to follow me on socials, I do the Instagram and the LinkedIn, and the Twitter X tends to be me shouting about politics in the UK. So that's not very.
Got it.
I'm still radical in that sense, and I still believe in change. I don't believe in change for change's sake. I just believe change we can make things better, and we will make things better together, and not by some individual telling us what to do. So that's what came out, and we can do it. We don't have to be political experts. Don't be we can make things better. So I think that sort of do-it-yourself thing is really important.
Yeah.
So searching around for some of that, and I came to this one song, and we've played this a lot as well. I saw this band before they were this band. In pubs and bars across North London when I was still at high school, and underage drinking. And the lead singer sadly died, and they're still around, but they were the tightest and funkiest band I've ever seen play live. And it's In During the Blockheads, and Sex
Oh,
and Drugs Roll. I don't know if you know it.
I don't know that one. I don't know
If
that
you
one.
don't, you really should, really should. Sex and Drugs and Rock and Roll is all my body needs. Um,
Awesome.
so yeah, so it's great, and he also has this great line in the middle, couplet in the middle, which it basically says, "Don't do nothing that is cut price. You know what that'll make you be. They will try you, tricky, tempt you with the ordinary. Don't do
Yeah.
stuff ordinary. It's
Yeah.
easy. It's easy. Don't do stuff. So do amazing stuff. And if we all have that as a, I mean, you know, music, as you can tell, music inspires me. If we all had that on our mouse mats, I think we'd all do more interesting stuff.
I
And
love it.
we'd be a better place, right?
Love
So
it.
that's number two. Number three, the last one is uh, it's a Madness cover. It's
Yes.
called It Must Be Love.
Okay.
And it was written by Labi Siffre, who is a South African emigre, came to live in the UK during apartheid, and is a great campaigner for both racial justice, social justice, and also for he was an early mover in the LGBTQ plus movement in the UK, and he is the most extraordinary, beautiful human being. He's still alive, but this song, it must be love.
Mhm.
I never thought I'd miss you quite as much as I do.
Yeah.
It's just beautiful, and it also has the most amazing middle eight with where the sax player does a little bit of popping, and then you get this wonderful like surf guitar ascending scale. It's just absolutely fantastic. And then everybody that we play to loves it, and they can't help but move their arms like this.
Yeah.
It's light as in the air moment. So that's, and the other reason for choosing that is it was the favorite song of my wife who died during lockdown, and I sang it to her.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
No, listen, it's okay. It's a good thing,
Yeah.
and all of us are going to have to face this stuff. The important thing about it is that that's the message. It must be love. Whatever else we do with our lives, do great things, but remember it's the people and the love that really counts. Everything else is nonsense. Rock and roll, close, but no cigar, honestly.
Hear, hear, Mark. Hear, hear. Excellent. Wow, what a great chat, and even better that we can continue the discussion at IEX.
Yes.
So glad you're coming over to the States. What great timing. So
Me too. Apparently, I'm on Thursday morning, just before the lunchtime slot. So
yeah, I will be podcasting live there as well. I'm not sure
brilliant.
what my time slot is, but we'll make sure to meet up. So looking
Excellent.
forward to it, Mark.
Excellent.
Yeah. Let's talk next month and rock and roll.
Rock and roll, my friend. Rock and roll.